How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number is 877-973-7425. I got to tell you, I'm trading notes here with a very prominent reporter y'all would all know who says the Republicans talking to him are ecstatic about Tim Walz as the Democratic nominee, how easy he's going to be defined as a radical liberal. Only the people on MSNBC view him as a pragmatic moderate because they're so far left. This is one of the problems you got to understand about the setup right now is that so many mainstream reporters now are to the left of Nancy Pelosi. So they look at someone and they view themselves as moderate. So they view a Tim Walz who's pretty radically progressive as a moderate guy like themselves. They don't realize how most Americans see them. Well, we'll have more to say on that. I'll take your phone calls as well. 877-973-7425. However, I got to talk about Google first. I want to go back in time. Google, a while back, a number of years ago, was forming a committee on artificial intelligence. One of the people they asked to be on their oversight board was Kay Cole James, who was the black female president of the Heritage Foundation. And progressives at Google, or whatever they call Alphabet now, they were furious that a black female would be on that committee because, in fact, she was conservative. At the same time, there were a lot of internal hullabaloo at Google over their algorithm. The argument from progressives inside Google was that you needed more black, queer, you name it, from the intersectional spectrum of LGBTQIA, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, in order for the algorithm to not just pull in white voices. To have a diverse algorithm, you needed a diversity of people programming the algorithm. What they really meant was you need a group of people who all look different but think the same, the Google hive mind of the left. One of the concerns conservatives have had for quite some time is that the Google algorithm, it is the dominant search engine in the country, and the Google algorithm is shaping what people find, the information that people find, that it has an explicit political bias. There are two stories I need to call your attention to today that are pretty troubling. One is Google has just lost an antitrust case. It's a landmark case in Washington, D.C. A federal judge there has ruled that Google's search dominance actually does make it a monopoly, that it has a 90% market share. Now, the Google apologists will say, well, you can go to Bing or you can go to DuckDuckGo or you can go to any of these other search engines. So it's not really a monopoly. The problem, though, is that Google not only controls about 90% of search, Google pays other companies like Apple to make the Google search engine the preference. Most people don't know there are other search engines. In fact, Google has become so common as a way to search that the word Google has in the dictionary become a verb. To search the internet is to Google. That's how monopolistic it's become. So you have a search engine monopoly like Google. And by the way, a monopoly does not actually mean that it is the only company. People say, well, it can't be a monopoly. There are other search engines like Bing. That's not legally what a monopoly means. What a monopoly is a company that is so disproportionately dominant that it controls a disproportionate market share. Now, here's the thing. Monopolies are not illegal. Monopolies are only illegal when they use their monopoly to shut out competition. The federal judge determined that Google is not only a monopoly under the law, but it's using its monopoly to shut out competition. Ironically, companies like Apple may actually be hurt more than Google over this ruling. Why? Because Google pays Apple billions of dollars to keep Google as the default search engine. So now Google will stop paying. And what will Apple do? Give you a box that says pick your search engine, and most people will still pick Google. So people will still be using Google through Apple. Google just won't be paying Apple for it. That hurts Apple, not Google. But there's a problem here, and it was uncovered in information provided to the House Judiciary Committee. Let me read you some of this from the House Judiciary Committee. Through its lawyers, Alphabet, which is Google, admitted to the committee and select subcommittee that after the July 13th assassination attempt on President Trump, quote, predictions for queries about the assassination attempt against former President Trump should have appeared but didn't. Alphabet explained that Google search's autocomplete's built-in protections around political violence were out of date, and that as a result, autocomplete failed to provide relevant results about the attempt on President Trump's life. Alphabet also shared that the company updated these protections once that issue was flagged, and that autocomplete now shows results about the July 13th assassination attempt as reflected in images provided. Google also admitted to the committee and select committee that autocomplete was not showing President Trump's name in response to searches for President Donald and similar terms. Google claims that this particular issue was caused by a bug and has been fixed by an update. Because the vague excuse leaves many questions unanswered, the committee would like Google to be prepared to answer more questions. Finally, Google tried to explain to the committee and select subcommittee why Google searches for Donald Trump return news labels and stories about Vice President Harris. Google claimed that this error was the result of its algorithm automatically generating and displaying labels about news topics related to a Google search inquiry. The company also noted that predictions may be unexpected or imperfect and bugs will occur. I myself experienced this. Donald Trump announced he would have a rally in Atlanta, Georgia, the one he did this past Saturday, a few days after Kamala Harris's rally. Days before either of them had their rally in Atlanta, I put into Google, Atlanta rally for Donald Trump. And the very first result was a banner, more information about Kamala Harris. What's notable is how all of the errors trend in one way. That's been the story at Google for quite some time now. They always say, oh, it's a bug. It's an error. But those errors and those bugs never actually benefit people on the right. They always benefit people on the left. This is James Lynch writing at National Review. An attorney for Google's parent company admitted that the autocomplete tool for its search function did not include the assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump. The admission came after the apparent search issue drew controversy online. Alphabet Inc.'s counsel informed the House Judiciary Committee that bugs in Google's autocomplete tool prevented it from predicting searches about the attempt on Trump's life. The built-in protections Google installed for searches related to political violence were outdated. Ahead of a private briefing with staff of the Judiciary Committee, Committee Chairman Jim Jordan wrote a letter to Google's CEO, Sundar Pichai, Monday, submitting a list of questions. Recent reporting has indicated Google may not be interfering in the 2024 presidential election by censoring information about former President Trump's ongoing campaign for the presidency, including related to the July 13th assassination attempt. In response to the committee and select committee's oversight, your counsel provided the committee and select committee with non-public information about Google's issues with search and autocomplete and the company's efforts to correct them, in addition to offering a private briefing. Jordan asked Pichai for more specific information about the bugs that caused President Donald searches to not show the autocomplete of Trump's name. Trump himself and many conservatives have strongly criticized the issue with Google searches. I myself have criticized these Google searches. It's becoming a problem. And, this reminds me when Google rolled out its AI and image generator. And you asked Google's AI to generate a picture of the founding fathers, there wasn't a white guy in the picture. When you asked Google's AI to generate pictures of white people, it didn't want you to do it, but it generated anyone else. I mean, it would turn Ben Franklin into a female from Kenya. It's very bizarre. It's the woke aspect of this. Google's team has admitted that you need a diverse group of people to program the algorithm so that the results are all very diverse. The problem here is that conservatives are not allowed, and we've seen this at Google for quite some time. Google has very relentlessly purged conservatives from its ranks. Repeatedly, Google has shut down conservatives. Let me give you a side note here from personal experience. My gathering is this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. One of the sponsors at my gathering is Meta, Facebook. They have been willing for multiple years to sponsor the gathering. Did not do it this year. Last several years, we've asked Google, should they like to sponsor? In exchange, they can bring someone, sit them on stage, and answer my and your questions about conservative concerns over the algorithm. And every year, Google has said, yes, we would love to sponsor. Still waiting for the sponsorship checks. I think we got one several years ago. Still waiting for the other sponsorship checks from Google. They just ghosted us. Said, yeah, we would love to come talk to conservatives about their concerns. Meta is willing to put someone on stage with me and hear our concerns about Facebook and Instagram and conservative concerns about the platform. Google says yes every time and never shows up. Facebook's willing to sponsor and have a relationship. We don't always agree. I criticize them. They come, they answer tough questions. Google refuses. Meanwhile, Google boots conservatives off of oversight boards, and its staff insists they need a diverse array of queer and trans people shaping the algorithm to ensure it reflects the views of the queer and trans community, but please no conservatives need apply. And Google has a monopoly on search, and it's taking advantage of that monopoly on search. Doesn't mean it's the only search company. It means it is disproportionately dominant, and a federal court has found that it uses that disproportionate dominance to benefit itself to keep other competitors from ever being able to grow against it. In fact, Google has a very good and thorough search engine. It's true. And Google spent a lot of time building it, from scanning books to other things to make it happen. The problem is once Google got into a dominant position, it then struck deals to make it almost impossible for any other search engine to compete against it. And a federal court has said Google has violated antitrust laws. It's a good decision. It is absolutely true that Google has a disproportionate dominant position in the marketplace that has allowed it to control search on the internet, so much so that to search the internet is now called to Google. That's how much of a monopoly Google is, that the word Google now means to search the internet. And when you search the internet on Google, Jim Jordan and the House Judiciary Committee have found that Google continues to generate searches that are very biased, not just against Donald Trump in particular, but conservatives in general. And any information from the right tends to be buried in the Google search. The truth itself can oftentimes be buried in a Google search in favor of a left-wing narrative. And weirdly and oddly and in a pattern, every time this happened, Google says, oh, it's just an error. We'll fix it. Every time we expose it, they'll fix it. We shouldn't have to keep finding errors. And it's notable the errors are always errors that benefit the left. AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry. Everybody's talking about it. Billions of dollars invested, so buckle up. The problem is AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, Databricks, Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/Erickson, ERICKSON. That's oracle.com/Erickson, oracle.com/Erickson. Go check them out today. So this is kind of wild. Welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425. The Free Beacon has this report out. There's a new group out called Vote ER, Voter. You get it? Vote ER, or VOT-ER, VOT-E-R for voter. It's a nonprofit founded by a Kamala Harris staffer targeting Democratic voting blocks in hospitals. And doctors are now registering patients to vote in mental hospitals, including suicidal and psychotic patients. Aaron Sabarium at the Washington Free Beacon. Many patients at the Pennsylvania Psychiatric Institute's inpatient clinic cannot complete the activities of daily living or are suicidal, aggressive, or dangerous to themselves or others. Since 2020, the hospital has been helping these patients vote. Located in a swing state that could decide the election, the hospital asks psychiatric inpatients, regardless of diagnosis, if they would be interested in voter registration tools that let them check their nearest polling station and register to vote online. Patients can request a mail-in ballot with assistance from hospital staff. The hospital has continued registering patients since 2020, including those who are not near discharge and have not yet been stabilized, on the grounds that voting is a therapeutic tool that helps empower patients and makes them feel good. Voting is an important part of the recovery process, Julie Graziani, a geriatric psychotherapist who leads the hospital's civic engagement efforts, said in a press release. Initially, the Pennsylvania-based institute was relying on voter support materials created by its own staff, but it has now turned to this Democratic nonprofit group founded by a Kamala Harris supporter, which develops, quote, nonpartisan civic engagement tools for every corner of the healthcare system. Alistair Martin served as an advisor to Vice President Kamala Harris. There are 50,000 doctors participating to register voters. There you go. So you've got the Harris campaign doing everything they can to register psychiatric patients to vote for her, which you do have to be a little bit insane to want to vote for a ticket like this one the Democrats have. And they're going to do everything they can to do it. Republicans, you gotta step up your game. You got to step up your game. Goodness gracious. All right. Now, I got to move on to other things here before we get on to this border invasion. Boy, y'all, have you heard this? Oh, well, stand by. I got information for you about what's happening at the border. However, before I get there, I need you to know that Old Glory Bank believes in protecting our first responders. If you're a police officer, firefighter, you're in the military, you're a Border Patrol agent, Old Glory Bank has what they call Old Glory Protect. They consider you a protector. So being a pro-America online bank who wants to protect and honor the protectors, Old Glory Bank has set up Old Glory Protect, which is a free $100,000 line-of-duty death benefit. It's available to Old Glory Bank account holders with direct deposit. That's it. You just have to have an Old Glory Bank account from oldglorybank.com that does direct deposit. Old Glory Protect is available to all military personnel, including Guard and Reserve. Firefighters, including volunteer firefighters, are eligible. Police are eligible. Border Patrol agents are eligible. From the beginning, Old Glory Bank has been the bank for first responders. Now with Old Glory Protect, the proof is in the protection. A free $100,000 line-of-duty death benefit available to Old Glory Bank account holders with direct deposit who are in the military or firefighters, police, Border Patrol agents. Go to oldglorybank.com. Terms and conditions apply. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender. Y'all, I'm sorry, but we got some weirdo stuff here. It just... You know, the Democrats, they're trying to define Trump and Vance as weird, but the Waltz family is just weird. This is kind of wild stuff. I want to play for you to set this up, the montage again. That someone, and I don't know who prepared this. I would love to give credit for it, but this is all a montage of the local news outlets in Minneapolis during the summer riot season of 2020, when progressives decided to burn down America. Tim Waltz allowed them to burn down Minneapolis. In fact, local police were begging Tim Waltz, the governor of Minnesota, for additional resources. Tim Waltz not only didn't give them resources, refused to send in the National Guard. Minneapolis, a lot of small businesses were burned to the ground as a result of Tim Waltz refusing to do so. It's kind of wild. And then Kamala Harris raised bail money to get the rioters out of jail. And this is who they've nominated. So this is the montage. You think Tim Waltz is weird? Wait till you hear from his wife. But you got to understand the concept to remind yourself of just what happened to Minneapolis in 2020 under Tim Waltz's leadership.
We are seeing such damage and destruction throughout Minneapolis and St. Paul. Things have gotten so out of control, it is hard to understand.
It's been a chaotic, at times violent day in South Minneapolis, turning into a situation unlike anything we've ever seen in our community.
From Chopper 5 up above, we can see the plume of smoke drifting towards downtown Minneapolis.
Started vandalizing the building, shattering a window, spray painting squad cars.
We are asking the governor, we're asking Mayor Fry, what is the plan here?
We saw people throwing rocks at police cars, at the precinct building.
This has gotten so out of control, it is definitely not a safe situation for anyone.
The tragedy would be if one of these dumpster fires spreads to one of those big apartment buildings or some of these homes, and then you can't get a fire truck down the street.
Please, Governor Walz, Mayor Fry, explain to us what the plan is.
We've seen protesters attacking police, defacing buildings, and looting from businesses.
The place is completely trashed. A lot of stuff has been hauled out of there. Sadly, no police presence in that area whatsoever.
I'm just so baffled. If this is being in charge, this is not a good look.
There is oil, there are chemicals, there are paints, all sorts of things that are combustible and that could really cause a huge explosion.
People are scared and people are angry and people want to hear from their governor.
If the governor and the mayor are not going to take care of this problem, people will. People will uprise over this.
This is a fail. I mean, this is an abject failure. I just don't think there's any other way to put it. You know, like I said earlier, the house is on fire. Will you please tell us if the fire department's on its way? I mean, is anything going to happen here? We're just going to let this burn.
Tim Waltz chose to let Minneapolis burn. Now, you want the weirder part. His wife did an interview after the riots. Listen to Tim Waltz's wife.
I would say those first days, you know, when there were riots, I could smell the burning tires. And that was a very real thing. And I kept the windows open for as long as I could because I felt like that was such a touchstone of what was happening.
Because it was such a touchstone of what was happening, she left the windows open at her home so she could smell the burning tires of the riots to feel connected to it. Okay, can we use creepy instead of weird? If weird defines the Republicans, this has got to be creepy. Your husband is letting the city burn, and you're saying you left the windows open at night just so you could smell the tires and feel connected in some way. This is wild. And if you want the fallout for this, The people of Minneapolis, I mean, many of them, they lost their places that they could shop. They lost the businesses that they owned. The damage that was done to that city because of Tim Walz's dereliction of duty was pretty enormous. And his wife is saying that they left the windows open so they could smell the tire. They didn't want to go put the tires out. They didn't want to go put the flames out. They wanted to actually smell it at night. This is a black resident of Minneapolis, Minnesota, who, well, had to deal with the fallout of Tim Walz's policies. Listen to this.
How was last night?
Scary. I live in the high-rise right back here, and I'd seen them as they came down Lake Street. But then they turned and started coming over here, and I'm sitting out looking out my window. And they went straight to Office Max, the dollar store, and every store over here that I go to. I have nowhere to go now. I have no way to get there because the buses aren't running. These people did this for no reason. It's not going to bring George back here. George is in a better place than we are. And last night, I'm going to be honest, I wish I was where George was because this is ridiculous. These people are tearing up our livelihood. This is the only place I could go to shop. And now I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have anywhere to get there.
I know you mentioned, being in your home last night, and you did have some folks that were helping, holding the ground. And you see some cleanup right now as well. There are signs of hope, but I can see the frustration still.
When the National Guard came down 31st and they realized that they were coming down 31st, they tried to run in the building where I live at. And they couldn't get in because there was security there. And I'm glad they were there. Because if they had got in that building, there's no telling where they would have hid to stay safe and try to mess with us inside the building because we're handicapped. And I'm not trying to use handicap as a crutch, but there are certain things I can and cannot do. And for them to do what they did last night was just stupid. It was ignorant. Now what are you going to do? Where are you going to shop at? Half the people probably don't even live in Minnesota. They don't care.
Stephanie, thank you so much. And I hope
it turns out a lot of the people who rioted in Minneapolis weren't even from Minneapolis. They came in Antifa types. And by the time Walz decided he would call out the National Guard, the stores were already burned and the tires were already piled up and in flames. The police cars had already been tied up. 62% increase in attacks on police in Minnesota since Walz became governor of Minnesota. And this poor lady, who is disabled and lives in government housing, everywhere she shops was burned to the ground in her neighborhood, and the governor of Minnesota did nothing to stop it. And then Kamala Harris bailed the people who did it out of jail. That's not an opinion, people. That's not my opinion. That's the God's honest truth to what happened. You may not like it that it's being pointed out, but it's true. That is what happened. This is now the Democratic Party ticket. It is too far left to have a Jew as the vice presidential nominee because the progressives don't like it. So you've got a man who let a city burn down, his capital city burn down, did nothing to stop it. His wife says they left the windows open in their house so they could smell the burning rubber to feel connected to what was happening. I just got to say, that's just one of the wildest things I've heard.
I would say those first days, when there were riots, I could smell the burning tires. And that was a very real thing. And I kept the windows open for as long as I could because I felt like that was such a touchstone of what was happening.
That was a touchstone of what was happening. So I left the windows open. This is bizarre. This is the Democratic ticket, that far left. That far left. Again, I think J.D. Vance, he went to Philadelphia. He's going to shadow Kamala Harris around the country. Where she goes, he's going to go. After all, she was going to debate him, and now she wants to debate Trump since she's the nominee. Trump says maybe there'll be a debate, but it's not going to be the debate against Joe Biden. They're going to have to rethink the debates because he agreed with Joe Biden, and then Joe Biden walked away. This is Vance from Philadelphia earlier today.
This is a guy who's proposed shipping more manufacturing jobs to China, who wants to make the American people more reliant on garbage energy instead of good American energy, and has proposed defunding the police just as Kamala Harris does. I think it's interesting, actually. They make an interesting tag team because, of course, Tim Walz allowed rioters to burn down Minneapolis in the summer of 2020, and then the few who got caught, Kamala Harris helped bail them out of jail. So it is more instructive for what it says about Kamala Harris, that she doesn't care about the border, she doesn't care about crime, she doesn't care about American energy, and most importantly, she doesn't care about the Americans who have been made to suffer under those policies.
From illegal aliens at the border, Tim Walz supports sanctuary states and sanctuary cities. He supports abortion on demand through the moment of through the moment of birth. He supports taking kids away from their parents if their parents don't support transitioning the kids and sex reassignment surgeries that are permanent. Kamala Harris has bowed to the far left in this nomination. She has bowed to the far left. They put Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, through a struggle session where he had to come out and apologize for supporting Israel, for having been a volunteer for the Israeli Defense Force. He said, I was 20 when I did it. That's my excuse. I was 20 when I did it. I've changed, people. I've changed. And still it wasn't enough. After putting him through a struggle session where he apologized for supporting Israel, they rejected him because the far left said, we can't have a Jew as vice president. Bad enough the first gentleman potentially could be one. We certainly can't have the vice president being one. Absolutely just wild. It is really wild stuff. And yet here we go. This is what Kamala Harris has chosen to do. This is who her pick is going to be. This man who is that far left. And here's the problem. If the Trump campaign does not tell everybody and run aggressive ads, you're not going to know it. I mean, I'll cover it, but it's not going to be covered by the media. They're trying to tell you he's a folksy moderate from Minnesota. So unless the Trump campaign has the resources to step up and fund this, or the outside super PACs, most Americans are not going to know how radical this ticket is. It is a very, very progressive radical ticket. But without money to run the ads, Trump and the super PACs, I mean, it's going to be political malpractice. Listen, there are billionaires out there who may not like Donald Trump at this point, but they got to see that this ticket is now so far left, so radical, so socialist. I mean, Tim Walz says socialism is just neighborliness. By the way, he set up a hotline so neighbors could rat out each other over COVID violations. That's how he loves neighborliness. Some super PAC billionaires better step up and make sure people know just how radical this ticket is. Now, I want to ask you to step up for Hillsdale College at ericforhillsdale.com. They're funding a curriculum for public and private schools around the country, for charter schools and homeschools, and it is a pro-America, truthful telling the founding of this country. It's got a civics program. It's got real math, not Common Core math. It's a great program for charter schools, classical education schools, Christian schools, public schools, homeschools. They need your help. They need your help at the collegiate level as well. They train the future of America in a collegiate system that actually teaches kids to think for themselves instead of indoctrinating them. Every kid who goes to Hillsdale either gets a job or a scholarship or both. They don't take federal funding. That's why your donation matters to help Hillsdale continue going. If you go to ericforhillsdale.com, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com, we shouldn't have to rely on the federal government to fund the future of America. Hillsdale College is willing to do it, but it requires you and me stepping up and supporting Hillsdale College as they advance this mission. It's all tax deductible as well. You go to ericforhillsdale.com today, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com today. Fund the minds of the future in a way that teaches them without indoctrinating them. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. Trevor has been waiting quite a while to get on the show. Thank you, Trevor, for being patient. How are you?
I am great. Thank you, Eric, for having me on your show. And as always, multiple prayers for your wife.
Thank you.
Continues to be strong. Listen, you called this back in 2022 with Stacey Abrams that black men were not supporting her. I think the Dems are realizing that black men, they're not polling to support Kamala Harris as well. So they've brought in Waltz, who is going to reignite the divisiveness that was, part of the 2020 election. And Trump needs to just stay on message. Instead of allowing the divisiveness, he needs to stay on message and focus on what he did during his tenure, whether it's HBCU funding, whether it's criminal justice reform, whether it's historically low black unemployment. That's what he did then, and that's what he's going to continue to do. Don't get caught up in the noise of we're divided.
Yeah, listen, that's so well said. And this now ticket on the Democratic side is giving him so much to work with. If you want to understand, like in a nugget, just how progressive Tim Waltz is, when the COVID vaccine first came out in Minnesota, Tim Waltz added BIPOC status as a way to ration the COVID vaccine. When it first came out, if you were classified as BIPOC, that is black, indigenous, people of color, then you were rated on a higher level than people with kidney disease or hypertension and got in line ahead of people with medical disabilities in order to get the COVID vaccine, because Tim Waltz wanted to, in a systemically racist society, put BIPOC people ahead of the line. No, I'm not making that up. This is now documented by Aaron Sabarium at the Washington Free Beacon. BIPOC status earned more points than hypertension in the state's allocation system for the COVID vaccine when it first came out. It earned the same amounts of points as age, body mass index, diabetes, and kidney disease, and more than hypertension. So there you have it. This is just how woke Tim Waltz is. He gave bonus points to non-white people in order to get the COVID vaccine. Just absolutely wild. It's also, by the way, illegal. It had to be discontinued under court order because it was racially discriminatory. Tim Waltz was willing to engage in racial discrimination in giving out the COVID vaccine. Absolutely bizarre.